which is what does it mean to redesign your work around AI's jagged frontier? So I'm going to call up and invite Dr. Amanda Williamson, who is the director of Deloitte New Zealand's AI Institute in Wellington. Now, I've known Dr. Amanda just 4 years, and she's been deep in AI long before many of us knew what the acronym stood for. I find that she really synchronizes the pace of innovation with our human appetite for change, so I love that these sessions with Pia and Dr. Amanda are back-to-back. Last time we connected doing a video for Govis, you had used the metaphor, it's a matter of not putting a jetpack on a push-pedal bike. We need to accelerate the right things. I hope you'll explain that metaphor for everyone else, but all to be said, there are many right answers in this space, and Dr. Amanda, we look forward to hearing a couple of yours. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tristana. Hello. Kia ora. Please put your hand up if you have run an AI tool for more than half an hour. So you've put something into the AI and it's run for more than half an hour. Just to get a sense. Okay, what about more than an hour? All right, very cool, very interesting. So we are in a really exciting time because the ground beneath us is changing in AI. But a lot of our leaders, unfortunately, are operating with the old mindset of AI. And when I say old, I mean AI old, like more than 8 months. They're working with the mindset of prompting. And this is the world that we really need to shift people on from. We've worked really well with AI when we give it a prompt. It gives us a response, and again, we prompt it and we get a response. Now, as you would have seen from those hands raised, we can give the AI a prompt. It can access context, it can access tools, and it can go off and execute on whatever you asked it to do for minutes and hours at a time. And this shift has happened mostly this year at a stage that we can actually say it's pretty good. And in fact, every graphic that you will see on the screen was produced by AI. It took it about an hour to do based on my script that I had created for this talk. So all of this is demonstrating the power of AI today. So for people who are working right at the frontier of what's possible with AI, it looks very different to how a lot of us are operating and working in our organizations. I talked with a leader at Anthropic last week who has AI in everything. And I said, how is it changing your work? How are you working differently? And he said, just something that I can't get out of my head. We don't have internal email. We don't send any emails internally. Gosh, can you imagine life without internal emails? And I said, yeah, well, that sounds really good, but we all know about the well-being implications of using AI a lot. Don't you miss the old days of paper and the old days of kind of the pre-AI-fied world? And I'll tell you what he said at the end. Ha! Would he go back? So we're talking about the frontier of AI, and I want to touch on what it means for us as we design our work. So let's start by determining what that frontier is right now. And what you're looking at on the screen are 6 projects. And these 6 projects come from the Remote Labour Index. You can see on there an interactive dashboard from the World Happiness data, 3D animations for creating new earbuds, developing architectural plans in a 3D model for a container home, lots of different tasks that people give real workers who are remote workers. So some smart cookies came up with the idea to give these tasks to AI. And it's been a bit of a wild ride if you've been watching the data on this. But what they did is they got the AI to produce the same things from the same input, from the same brief. And what you can see on the screen here is a human professional's creation of the World Happiness report data in an interactive dashboard, and an AI agent one on the right. I mean, personally, I prefer the human one. Anyone else? Yeah, it's a bit more colourful. Yes, that's true. At least our one, you can see New Zealand. So very, very good point. So what they found is they said, okay, what would happen if we actually see how many people would actually buy the AI version from a single prompt, by the way. And what they found was it wasn't particularly amazing. When they did this test a couple of years ago, they found that only about 2.5% of them would successfully be purchased, the AI-produced ones, that is. And then they ran it again 8 months later, and 15.83% of the AI-generated outputs would be used. And interestingly, this has just been run again recently with Fable 5, and it's 16.1. So the change that's going on in these really advanced tasks is absolutely remarkable. These tasks that I showed you, by the way, they take an average human 29 hours to do. So substantial amount of work. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting, but I'm not a person doing remote work. I don't need to create an interactive dashboard. Well, let's look at one more piece of evidence before we move on about what it means for redesigning work. This is the GDP val task that I want to talk to you about. And this comes from OpenAI, so take the results with a grain of salt, as always. But GDP val, as the name might suggest, is all focused on economic contributors of AI. And what the researchers did here is they took 44 occupations and got different tasks from within those occupations. 5 of those were focused on government work. And a government example that we've got on the screen here is actually a brief that said people have had a come back to office mandate and now are complaining of having neck and shoulder pain. Here's your task. You need to produce 2 files. You need to produce a workstation checklist, 5-page limit is required, and a word tracker with equipment, approvals, and resolutions that people can put in live. And off the AI went. Now, the humans, when it did the same task, it took them around 7 hours. This task is smaller than the other one, as you probably noted. Any guesses on how well it's done? You might see it in little writing at the bottom. It did incredibly well. It met or bet the human in 84% of the tasks. 84%. So it's absolutely wild. That's the world we're living in now. Now, with that context of how fast things are moving behind us, I do want to point out the elephant in the room, which is these are very constrained tasks. We're giving AI things to do that have a clear brief, that have data. If our life was that easy that someone could just give us a clear brief, man, that would be brilliant. We'd sleep very well at night. But we're often dealing with really messy requirements. And I think that's a secret source of what a lot of us do. It's figuring out what we're trying to achieve and executing that. So, a job is a bundle of tasks. It's figuring out what the right thing to do is. It's about human relationships and connecting dots along the way. So very much not about removing roles. But if we reflect on that pace that I mentioned in 8 months, going from 2.5% all the way up to 16.1 with the GDP val, or the remote jobs index, you would have noticed that what AI could do before and what AI could do now is shifting dramatically. And you may recall the term called the jagged frontier of AI. It comes from some fancy researchers who looked at consultants at BCG, and they examined how well they were able to do 18 tasks that they knew AI could actually perform very effectively. So the people using AI in tasks that the researchers knew they could do well, they actually did a lot better. They were able to do 12.5% more work than their companions who didn't have an AI, and they were able to do it faster in 25% of the time, and 40% of the time it was also of better quality. So great improvements from using AI. But they were tricky. They were very tricky. And they also gave them a task to do that they knew the AI would fail at. And guess what? They did worse. than the humans in those tasks. 19 percentage points less likely to get to the correct answer in those cases, but it looked really beautiful. And this taught us an important lesson at the time about how jagged AI tasks are. Up until a few weeks ago, AI was still grappling with getting the right number of R's in strawberry. And yet, on the other hand, it's beating the charts around AI, problem solving and maths. In fact, it's doing incredible advancements in science as well. So how is it possible that things for us that are so simple for AI are not? Well, this is why it's jagged. It just doesn't make sense to humans where it performs well. And that's the kind of first takeaway, really. It's that AI is more capable than what most organizations are planning for. A lot of the AI policies that you've probably got in your organizations right now are built around assumptions that are just not true any longer. So we are in this world where the frontier is moving so rapidly. And here's a really interesting thing about the frontier. It varies. You will have your very own frontier. You'll have access to different models within your work environment and within your personal life than other people do. And what tasks you need the AI to do will also look very different to what those AI lab studies are focused on. So what's going to look good for you in a given task is going to be very different to someone else. So that's the world that we're working in. The frontier is jagged, and that jagged frontier is moving outwards at a rate that's absolutely mind-boggling. So what can we do? Well, I get the pleasure of working with many cool leaders and organizations from New Zealand and beyond, and I've noticed 5 key things that they do well. And here they are. We'll work through them quite rapidly, and then we'll sum up from there. The first thing is that they have to operate within an environment that actually allows them to go forward and innovate. And this is a caveat to anything that we say around redesigning work. We can't redesign work if we don't have access to tools, if we don't have the culture and pathways for innovation. So just a quick caveat as we dive into this, those things have to be sorted out up front. We need to make sure we've got lawful use in our environment where we can play with AI, where we can find out where the frontier is on any given week. So keeping that as a prerequisite, let's dive in. The first one, as you've heard so many times today, AI needs to be solving problems that matter. We know about the costs of AI, both economic costs and social costs, as well as environmental. So sometimes we're addressing problems with AI out front and center. But what I'm seeing from really leading organizations is that they're flipping this and they're coming back to the key principles that we all know, which is we need to go after really good problems. We need to be focused on the humans and the impact and making sure that where we're putting AI and what things we want to redesign around AI have sufficient volume and use to be worthwhile. The second piece is that, or continuing on from that really, is this question about the workflow itself. I've seen so many cool AI solutions for problems that don't really matter or workflows that shouldn't exist. So a relentless focus on, is this workflow actually something that we need? For example, do we really need 6 signatures on a document? We could certainly use AI to help automate some of that or other tools, but maybe that process just needs to be reconsidered from the start anyway. The second key thing that I've seen in organizations doing a really good job of redesigning work around that ever-moving frontier is giving the AI a job interview. This means being very clear about what your key tasks are and even setting up some questions that you'll ask over and over again, because AI models are going to keep being released. So if you have a set of questions, a set of problems that you would really like AI to solve, people actually are getting into the discipline of asking every new model to take action on certain tasks and seeing how it performs. It's a really powerful thing to do, and I would encourage us all to take that action upon ourselves in our own frontier. Thirdly, management. Management is the new prompting. And I mean that by, there was a time when prompt engineers was an actual role that people could get in organizations. That's no longer the case. We no longer need to do complex ways to prompt the AI and tell it its persona. That's no longer required for AI to perform really well. Now, we just need to treat it like a human when we're onboarding someone completely new. So the skills that managers have are incredibly valuable for working with AI. Those skills include giving it the context it needs. You know, if we get a new employee who comes in, they know nothing, and we need to treat the AI sometimes the same way. We also need to have management skills by telling it and making explicit some of the things that we know that maybe it doesn't. There might be things about fairness that we want it to take into account. We might want it to be representative. So having all of those key pieces is absolutely fundamental. And I think this is going to be a skill for the future, being a good manager. Not to mention, as organizations get more and more agents, we all become managers of agents. On my computer, I have loads of different terminals with different agents running, and I have to get really good at managing each of them and making sure I'm working on the right terminal at the right time, and I see that happening more and more, and not just for technical people. I'm seeing a merging of those skills, and management skills is absolutely central. But in saying that, no matter how good your management skills are, AI does need a little bit more than just great managers. We're in this really weird state right now that 87% of people in a Glean study mentioned that they were using AI, and 75% of them felt a lot more productive. And yet, only 13% said that their organization was performing better because of it. So what on earth are they doing if they're getting so much more productivity? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're copying and pasting. Does it sound familiar? We're somehow in this really awkward stage right now where we're having to copy context or copy information and paste it into the AI tool on one platform and paste it elsewhere. It's absolutely bonkers. And we'll look back at this time like with the same nostalgia we look back at dial-up internet. Like, oh, when I was, young, we had to copy and paste things into AI. It's wild. So, we're in that stage right now, and I think to move beyond it, we will get agents that are connected. So thinking back to the Anthropic example where they don't have email, everything's out in the open, everything's connected, and I think that's the way of the future. But in doing that, we have to make really good choices around what we're happy for the agent to access. Does it need my identity if I'm the one driving the agent, or should it have its own identity within a system? So lots to explore within there. But just like good managers, we also need to know about the fact that ultimately we are responsible for whatever it does. It can take away a lot of the work, but we're still in charge of the output. And that is a real issue, because I'm not sure if anyone is dealing with a lot of AI slop at the moment. Yes, I see nods in the room. And guess what? We're really bad at reviewing the output of AI. There is a very interesting study by Fabrizio Deloitte, and he looked at recruiters who were using AI tools. And he found something really interesting, which was the better the AI tool, the worse they performed, because people just weren't good at working with AI in a way or understanding where it went wrong. So we kind of need to flip the way that we're reviewing things. So one thing that I do, if I'm starting to write something, I will make sure I put my ideas down first, and then I'll get the AI to critique it. If I'm reviewing, I'll do a blind review before I see the output of the AI. What would I do in this circumstance? And I think we need to flip that to work at the frontier as well. And then finally, the pilot. When we do get lucky and we find a great way that AI can work at the frontier and make a big impact on things that matter, I think a lot of us are very aware that will open up new problems. You can solve one problem in the pipeline and it'll open up a new one because we'll have new tasks we need to solve as well. So a big part of working at the frontier in AI is being a system thinker and actually thinking about what will the flow-on effects be later on. So coming back to the anthropic person who I asked, would you like to go back? Because do you know what? I love nothing more than watching a man on a stage play a guitar or reading a physical book. There are certain things about the old way of doing things that are not in the digital age that I love, and I wondered if that might be the same with AI. And he said, no, he would not. In fact, he said it would be extortionately frustrating to go back to the old world where AI wasn't connected into all the systems. So, in closing, we are now in the world where our job, unfortunately, is now figuring out at our own frontier what AI is capable of doing in really odd and weird ways, like the strawberry example, which is now solved, I'm told. This is part of our work right now. So we've got a very, very interesting period for leadership, for us. But if we're going after the things that matter, I hope that we can redesign in really smart ways, that we can make sure we've got innovation pathways within our organization so we can continue to upskill, and we really lean into the skills that we've acquired over all these years in management and system thinking and in solving big problems. Because redesigning work is now your new job with AI. Congratulations.